box has a brand new pack of cards. Let's see what's inside.
Welcome back, everyone, and today we are going to be doing Someone Always Tells, probably Ario Hota's best and one of his only lines, so let's get to it. Since we are starting off backwards, we get the privilege of one of the most interesting plot cards in the game, You Win or You Die. A casual glance at this card makes it seem completely overpowered, not to say that it isn't. 5 gold, good, 8 initiative, very high, and 2 claim, and then when revealed, draw 2 cards. That's awesome. It's also a scheme, so you can use it with a ton of Lannister support. But there's one stat that we didn't look at, isn't there? Yeah, the reserve on this thing is 0, so this is really you win or you die. You get a crazy turn. You have resources, you get choice to go first or not, you get double claim, and you get 2 free cards as soon as you play it. That turn for you is going to be huge. But if that turn is not huge enough to win you the entire game, you scrap your whole hand, and all of a sudden you've got nothing except what you've got on the board. I still think this is a good card, especially if your hand is kind of low already. You could play something like Counting Coppers, which would draw you cards, or you could play something like this, which just says, fuck it, if my hand's going to be low, I'm going to get a huge turn and then make it 0. This card is a lot of fun, very splashable, great card. Moving on to the neutral cards, they are both the 7 cards. The first one is the non-unique attachment, the 7-pointed star. So it is an item, so it's pretty searchable, but it also has the 7 trait. Not to mention that whatever it's equipped to gets the 7 trait, and then it essentially becomes one of those marshalling cheapeners. This definitely has a better place in a dedicated the 7 deck where you're running maybe the Faith Militant agenda or maybe just splashing it in as an engine. If your deck is focusing on key cards like, off the top of my head, Sir Davos Seaworth, Catelyn Tully, Baelor Blacktide is a the 7 card. If the best card in your deck is a the 7 card, or you just really like the support for it and you're running a couple other 7s, toss this in. It's non-unique. It gives things the 7 trait. It makes things cheaper. It only works with one archetype, and it's not even a faction. But it gets the job done. The other neutral card also is the 7. It also has the King's Landing trait, which is hilarious to be a trait because it's also a location in itself. This is the Great Sept of Baelor. This is a bestow card, and it has bestow 3, which means if you are playing Favors to the Crown, it can actually get up to bestow 5, but that would be rather costly. It costs 2 to play anyway, so if you want to full bestow this thing, you're putting this thing in with 5. Its effect is just after a character enters play, which can be your opponent's or yours if you have cards with negative effects. Let's not forget all the wacky shenanigans you can do. Kneel this card, discard a gold from it, and then make that character's printed text box blank until the end of the turn. This is interesting. You can only do it maximum 3 times, and to even do it 3 times requires a huge gold investment. It's the 7 location, which you can put power and stuff on, and they seem to have this little theme of getting rid of people's printed text box. However, I think this is a bit expensive. I'd rather this not kneel itself since you already have to pay the bestow cost. I don't feel like it's necessary. If you wanted to do this several times in a turn, you should be able to if you put that much gold on it. I think the Starry Sept is a better method of getting their cards to have no printed text. But why not splash it in? I mean, if that's what you're going for, who needs Milk of the Poppy when you've got the Great Sept of Baelor, R.I.P. Ned Stark. Next, we have Mia Stone. Now, she is a bastard. She is one of Robert's many bastards, but she lives in the Vale, and weirdly enough, she doesn't have the House Aaron trait. Now, you might look at her at first glance and say, 4 gold for 2 strength and only a power icon? No thanks. I'm going to stick to my in-faction cards that actually are supported. Other than the Bastard trait, that does have some support, mostly in Baratheons. Yeah, she doesn't have much support, but her effect, I think, is really good. Yes, this isn't great in terms of getting to your win condition, and yeah, it is rather costly to have out, but it essentially makes you more or less immune to military challenges, or if you really care, intrigue. Your opponent would need to be able to do 2 of those types of challenges in a turn. It doesn't even matter if they have 2 claim. Yeah, they'll get 2 power, but Mia Stone will stop the challenge. So if you notice that you don't have a lot of military power in your deck and you're worried about things getting killed off, splash in Mia Stone. Moving past the neutrals onto Dorne, we have the titular card Someone Always Tells. It's a 2-cost event, which I hate, but this one is fascinating. When the effects of an opponent's event or triggered plot ability would initiate, you cancel it. That's wacky as hell, because if it's a when revealed plot ability, you wouldn't have the gold yet. Several ways that you can either reduce the cost of this or get gold before you should have it. If you have the Water Gardens, you can kneel it to play this from your hand for free, or if you play Littlefinger's Meddling, maybe the Long Scheme. That's a Dornish plot card. But anyway, if you can play this on a when revealed ability, your opponent is going to be like, duh. More realistically, it's going to be more common that you can play this on an effect that happens in the middle of the challenges phase, for example. There's a lot of plot cards that have effects that don't happen until the challenges phase, so that your opponent has some time to deal with it. Or even if it's a marshalling thing, you would have your gold by then. So this is a really fun card. It's one of the few things that can negate plot effects. Most things that are negates are like negate character, event, attachment, location, but they leave out plot and agenda. I mean, I don't know if anything can negate an agenda, but this can negate a plot. I've done it with Water Gardens. It's really fun. It's a 2-cost event though, and if you don't get to negate their plot ability, just negating an event for 2 costs, not that great. You could probably have negated it for cheaper with the Hand's Judgment, or at least probably not more expensive. But I love this card. It's fun. And now we have a card I don't love, Host of the Boneway. So it's non-unique, but it's 6 costs, so good luck getting more than one of these out. It has cool icons. It's not the boring old military and power. It's military and intrigue, which is good for Dorne because they have Duran's game and a lot of things that like intrigue. It does have intimidate, which is phenomenal. It's an army, which means you can stand it with high ground, but it can't have any attachments. It does follow the Dorne synergy a lot. Doran himself buffs everyone for each plot card in your used pile. Cletus Ironwood gives you initiative for each plot card in your used pile. There are countless Dornish cards that care about plot cards in your used pile. If you are playing the Wars to Come deck and you have Ricasso, the maximum amount of plot cards in your used pile could possibly be 11. So this guy could get 11 strength. Doran would give him strength if he were a lord without him having to have this effect himself. But honestly, don't think it's worth it. If you're going to be a 6 cost, you better be unique so that Great Hall can make you viable. Like, if you play an average gold card, like 5 gold, you're not going to be able to get this guy out without some help from Blood Orange Grove or something. Would that be worth it for your whole turn? 2 icons. It does have Intimidate, which is huge. If it didn't have Intimidate, this card would be trash. It would be useless. I still think it should be cheaper. Its ability, while synergistic, is just frankly lazy. I mean, come on. I think they did this just to make a Dornish army card because to my knowledge, they don't have another one. Fun Targ card coming up. To go forward, you must go back. We have this cool artwork of Quaithe of Ashai appearing in some kind of dream smoke to Daenerys to give her cryptic riddles as she loves to do. Oh yeah, it's a prophecy card, of course. This is a dominance action, so you do have to save 2 gold until the end of the turn to do it, but then both players shuffle their hand, as long as it's at least 1 card, into their deck. Targaryens like to discard cards from your hand. So if you have done that too much and you don't have enough resources and you maybe don't want to play something like Counting Coppers as your next plot card to draw because it wouldn't give you enough gold or something, you can have this and then you can toss the 1 card you have left in your hand for 5. So you would have to have this and 1 other card. You would need 2 cards left in your hand and 2 gold. You play this, you toss the 1 card, and then that turns into 5. So you went +3 on card advantage. However, that is very specific. I don't know if that's necessarily worth it. I mean, I don't think this card is that good. I see why they made it. It's cool. It would be really fun to pull off as a way to refresh your hand. But I think most of the time it would probably be a brick. And if you have enough cards in your hand already, it's almost certainly not worth 2 gold just to swap them out for new ones without actually gaining hand advantage just because you didn't like the cards in your hand. But I do like the artwork. Another 6 cost non-unique army. This one's raiding Khalasar. This one does have the boring icons of military and power. It's a Dothraki card though, and I'm not super familiar with the Dothraki sub-strategy of the Targs, but I'm pretty sure there are cheap ways to put it into play from your hand. If it's attacking and you control an attacking Blood Rider character, then you get extra claim. That's good. That's the kind of thing an army card should have, especially if you're using Muster the Realm, of the plot card that increases the claim value on all your challenges that include army cards. You could double raise the claim value, which is just great. This card is good in a Dothraki deck. I haven't built a Dothraki deck, but they seem to have a lot of good options. I don't like no attachments. Pillage is completely useless. In fact, I didn't even realize there was a card outside of Greyjoys and Lannisters that had pillage. It's worthless in Targaryens, and it's almost worthless in general. But you can't deny increasing your claim. That's great. This guy may be 6. This guy may not be able to have attachments, but bring out those Blood Riders, bring out Khal Drogo to get those extra military challenges and extra claim. Like, yeah, I could see this guy being part of a very intimidating board. How you would get there, I'm not sure, but it would be dangerous. This card is hilarious. It's called Driftwood Cudgel, so it's basically just a piece of driftwood that only the Iron Islanders have access to. It barely is formed into a cudgel. You can see it's not even really carved very well. But for some reason, they've decided that not only is this stupid piece of wood restricted to the Greyjoys and is even considered to be a weapon, it's a Drowned God card. It's Drowned God characters only. They get +1 strength for each character in your dead pile. Drowned Gods like to sort of kill themselves or kill other Drowned Gods. It's weird. But then it has this other strange ability. When they're killed, the attached character, you move Driftwood Cudgel to another eligible character, aka a Drowned God character, and it gains 1 power. That is very odd. This is acknowledging the fact that you want a lot of characters in your dead pile by giving extra strength to the attached character, and then it's acknowledging the fact that to do that, you're gonna have to kill things by having this move if the attached character gets killed. However, moving and then putting a power on them is weird, because then you're not going to want to do that again. If you kill that character and move it and get a power, well, you just lost the power you just gained. It should be move it to them and gain 1 power for your faction card. Maybe that would be a little too overpowered for its non-uniqueness and its cost. I just find it very odd that it puts a power on something that it's almost encouraging you to kill within its own text. This card is just hilarious. I don't usually run it with the Drowned Gods because they've got other things going on, and I do find it to be a bit weird, but hey, if you want to have strength and get benefits for the amount of characters in your dead pile, and you don't want to run Silent Sisters, run Driftwood Cudgel. Saltcliff Sailor is fun. This is one of those cards that is in a faction, but supports things that aren't that faction, so it sort of incentivizes you to build a combo deck. This one has Bestow as well. So you put 3 gold on it, or however much you want to. You can move a gold to a non-Ironborn character you control in order to give it stealth. But it's actually more powerful than that, because it's a passive ability that anything that has gold on it gets stealth. So if you run this in a Bestow build, those other things with Bestow, they'll have stealth. This character itself, until it runs out of gold, will have stealth. This is good because the Greyjoy strategy relies a lot more on stealth than other factions do, and if you make that your win condition but you have a combo deck, then you might want ways to get the other non-faction cards stealth. All in all, just a pretty solid Bestow card. I wish that other Bestow cards were like this, where you can put gold on things, and then there are benefits for everything that has gold, so Bestow cards would kind of inherently support each other instead of just having random abilities that happen to require extra gold. I like how this next Lannister card is called A Plot Against the Queen. It clearly depicts Cersei kind of depressed in her cell when this was her plot. She kind of brought this on herself, nor is she the queen, so strange. But it is a loyal Lannister event. It's a reaction. After you lose a power challenge, you pick a character you have that has 1 or more power, and you put it back to your hand. Oh man, you don't want to do that. That character has power. But then you can do the same thing to one of your opponent's characters, so long as they also have power and were participating in the challenge that you just lost, which was specifically a power challenge. Very niche criteria. It's not too hard for you to get power on your cards, especially if you're using the version of Cersei that does. There are actually a lot of things in the Lannister deck that have to do with gaining power that you don't necessarily want for your win condition, but then that you use as sort of a cost, like Walk of Atonement gives up your power for stuff. This one is a 0 cost event, thank God, but really, I don't know, it's hard to forfeit power challenges because your opponent's probably not going to care that much if you win a power challenge, and so you probably couldn't force this out. If your opponent initiates a power challenge against you, yeah, you could play that, but you need them to initiate a power challenge against you with a character that has 1 or more power. If it has 1 or more power, chances are that it has Renown. If it has Renown, chances are that it's a high cost with other icons, and they would probably use it to focus on those more important challenges. So I think this card is pretty bad, but I might be wrong. Kai freaking Burn. He is a 4 cost with only 3 strength and 1 icon, but his traits are awesome. So he's a maester. Unfortunately, he's a loyal maester, so if you want to use a conclave deck, you have to pick the Lannisters as your faction. But he's also a small council character. There is very little support for small council cards. There's one neutral attachment that turns things into a small council, and then there's an event which has to do with standing small council cards. My friend Dan has been very interested in making a small council deck, but it's very difficult because the small council cards are spread between all these different factions, and ones like these are loyal, which really restrict how many you can run. Not to mention that there's very little support, and it would be more of a meme deck, if anything. However, I did recently find out that there is a draft format of this game, and there's a Hand of the King variant, which I don't know the specific rules of, but it has special agendas, and one of the agendas is include non-loyal small council characters from any faction in your deck. However, it also has a bunch of ridiculous other abilities, like you can run an additional agenda in addition to this way. It's crazy. It's absurd, but I wish they would have that because a small council build would be fun. It seems like when they started, they did have an idea of making that into a supported archetype, and they just kind of gave up on it. But okay, yeah, whatever. I mean, the Maester thing is honestly more helpful because you can use all those Maester cards. You can use the amazing plot card Outwit. He's just got one good trait and then one trait. He's unique. He's loyal. He just has 1 icon, which is bad. 3 strength is fine. 4 gold is kind of expensive. But long story short, when a character is killed, you can kneel him to draw 2 cards and then toss 1 from your hand. The cycling is good. Doesn't really matter if you toss 1 from your hand because you're going up 1 card and you're cycling through 2 cards. It's very unlikely that you'll be able to do something with the card you discarded from your hand, like fetch it back or put it into play. Like the Kingsguard plot card can do that, but not a lot of things can. Mostly you're just going to be tossing your worst card. Although Kevin Lannister, when he's marshaled, can bring back Lannister or neutral locations or attachments, I think. So I guess you could try that. He's not game-changing, but he's good. If he didn't kneel himself, that would be game-changing. However, because he kneels himself, they assume that it's restricted to once per round or once per phase or whatever, but you could maybe find a way to stand him again and then do it all over again if multiple things are dying. It might make your opponent a little bit more hesitant to do those military challenges against you, which Lannisters don't really like because unless they're running clansmen, they have mostly intrigue icons like this guy. So even if they do a military challenge and they kill off one of your guys, Qyburn's like, interesting, I will harvest this man for parts and add them to my hand. So decent card, solid card. So for the Baratheons, we have King at the Wall to start. So this is one of those cool cards that gives a character the King trait. So if you want to run the King in the North, but you're a little worried that you're not running enough King cards or they're not safe enough, you can just splash on this 1 cost attachment, give something the King trait, and then any King support will help it. But then this has an additional ability that helps you draw cards. After you win a power challenge with that character, then you can draw 1 card for each out-of-faction location you control. Now, when I first saw this card, I thought it was busted because I thought neutral cards were considered out-of-faction. I have recently learned that they are not. They are no factions. They're out of all factions, but they're not out of your faction. So this is really best suited to, yes, a Baratheon deck that is supporting kings with things like the Stormlands, but also a Baratheon deck that doesn't rely on its own locations. And it doesn't even rely on that many neutral locations, maybe a couple. I mean, you need some gold, but it relies on out-of-faction locations from the Banner or the Alliance, whatever other factions you're running, to draw cards. However, if you're doing that correctly, if you have even 2 out-of-faction locations, every time you win a power challenge with that character, you draw 2 cards, 1 cost attachment that also makes him a king. Sign me up. This card does require a certain deck to work in, so I'm not going to say it's like hyper splashable, but if you made that deck, this card would be a fucking core part of it. This card is crazy hand advantage if you have the right deck. The Bastard of Night Song. So awkward, 5 cost, unique, with the boring icons. He is a bastard, so he gets bastard support, which is in Baratheons. And he is a knight, so he gets knight support, which is all over the place. After he wins a power challenge, you can take an extra power from your opponent. Alright, I mean, Baratheons love winning power challenges, but there's a certain point where it's beating a dead horse. If you have set up your deck so that you're going to win a bunch of power challenges, which is the type of deck that this guy will go into, your opponent might be getting power with other ways. They might be getting power on their cards, on the field. They might be waiting for some big coup de grace to sweep all the power. I think if you're using like the Stormlands and raising your claim and stuff, your opponent is just going to run out of power to give you. So yeah, on paper, it's an extra power for every power challenge, basically raises the claim. That's awesome. But it relies on taking power from your opponent. If they don't have it, this doesn't work. However, if you whip this guy out near the end when your opponent was about to win and you needed a little time to catch up, might help you bridge the gap a bit. However, like I said, that's not really the type of deck that this guy goes into. So, cool card because he's a bastard and he's a knight and because he supports power challenges, but I think there are way better cards that do it. I fucking love this card. The Crow is a tricksy bird. So, it's a 2-cost event. We've been seeing a lot of them. It's a loyal Night's Watch card, and it's a plot action. So, like someone always tells, it's very difficult to play this because at least someone always tells you could play to counter an event and not just a plot. This you have to play during the plot phase when you don't have gold. So you got to be a tricksy bird to play this. But it is so good. You get to kneel your faction card and look at your opponent's plot deck, which right away, first of all, let's talk about that. Look through your opponent's entire plot deck. Depending on how early in the game this is, the information, while being redundant if you play this again, is massive information to have, to know exactly what board wipes they have, what their ways of getting gold are. If you're running naval superiority, you'll immediately know if they're relying on kingdom plot cards. That's a ton of information. And if that weren't enough, then you get to pick which card they play next turn. Considering that picking your plot card is the most agency you have in this entire game because you have a 60 card deck that you draw a hand from and then you look at that hand and then you pick things. But every turn, at least you know I'm picking what plot card I have. Your opponent is going to lose it. They won't have enough gold to pay for things. They'll play VALAR MORGHULIS when they're the only ones with cards on the board. They'll play King in the North when they don't have a king yet. You can do crazy shit with this card, but how are you going to play it? Well, there's a few ways. There's a winter card called Ranger's Cash. It doesn't have great stats, but then at the end of the turn, after taxation, you can either draw cards or gain gold. If you use that, then you could gain the gold for next turn and have it ready to go when you want to play this. You can also use Littlefinger's Meddling to reduce the cost of all events you play by 2 and then play this for free. There are some ways where you don't even need to be that tricksy about it. Some of the best gold getting cards in the game are Calling the Banners, which doesn't have much gold, but when you play it, you get a gold for every character your opponent controls. And Trade Routes, which also doesn't have much gold, but when you play it, you get a gold for each location you and your opponent control, which for Night's Watch can be a lot of gold. So those 2 cards, even though you haven't collected income yet, since their when revealed ability gives you gold, you would then still be in the plot phase with gold, and you could play this card. This is a phenomenally powerful effect. It is an absurd amount of fun to piss off your opponent with this card. However, it does require extreme measures in order to be able to play even once, let alone regularly. I bent over backwards to make a deck that could run 3 copies of this card, but it is so cool, so unique, and just adds another layer of trolling to the Night's Watch, who are already stealing your cards and stealing your gold, and now they're telling you what plot you're picking. I love this card. I will say, though, that the artwork is a bit lacking. I mean, the quote refers to Mance Raider, and here we just have some unnamed Night's Watchman hiding behind a tree, watching, I don't know, I guess a wildling release a crow. I guess that's symbolism. Whatever, moving on. Second Night's Watch card is Septon Celador. So he's the 7 card that I can think of in the Night's Watch deck, although there are others that worship the 7, so I might be wrong about that. He's kind of weird, because he's loyal, so he messes up Hollow Hill. He's not a ranger, builder, or steward, so he doesn't support with his traits a lot of the Night's Watch stuff, and he's not very searchable. He's 4 gold, 1 icon, 2 strength, but you can kneel him to choose your opponent. They have to toss a character from their hand. If they don't have characters, even though his effect kind of fizzles, you have to look at their hand to confirm that. They either toss a character or you get to see their hand. I wish he didn't have to kneel himself, but them's the breaks. This is really good in a Night's Watch deck that's focusing on the wall and the old bear to steal stuff from their discard pile because you can only steal characters. Greyjoy decks that use pillage have the abilities to steal locations and things like that, but the Night's Watch deck is very exclusive to stealing characters from your opponent's discard pile. So if you're just relying on intrigue challenges to fill that up, you're going to be filling it up with a bunch of card types that you can't take. Septon Celador forces a character, which is really good and very helpful, and he just looks like a badass standing there like, what? What are you going to do? I got rid of your character. Tyrells begin with an event called This Must Be Answered Fiercely. So in order to even trigger this card, your opponent has to declare at least 3 attackers in one challenge. Now, I can see why they might do that, because you are probably a Tyrell deck that's buffing up one guy to an absurd degree. However, that is still a ridiculous requirement for something that costs 2 gold before we even get into its effect. You have to save 2 gold, and then if your opponent doesn't do that, which they very well might not, may well not be able to, you would save 2 of your precious gold, and then it might just go to waste. But after that happens, then you get to search your entire deck for a Tyrell character. No other restrictions than that. Toss it into play. That is answering quite fiercely. Yeah, you will almost never pull this card off, and you might spend a few turns not spending as much gold as you should because you want to play this card. So in that regard, it's probably going to be dead in your hand most of the time. But when you play this card, I cannot think of anything with that kind of search power except for plot cards. Not only search your deck for any character with any printed cost in your faction, but actually put it into play. That's crazy. Even the Prince That Was Promised agenda, when you win that, and that's your agenda, you are picking that to build your entire deck around. The opportunity cost of picking that agenda is huge. That agenda even only lets you search the character and add it to your hand, and considering it's probably a high cost, that's pretty problematic. This lets you put the Queen of Thorns right into play if you want to. And then if she wins a challenge, you can put more cards into play for free from your hand. This can save you so much gold. I am torn about it. I haven't really made a Tyrell deck yet, so I haven't used this. I really do think that 9 out of 10 games you wouldn't get to play it. But if you do get to play it, that will sway the tide so far in your favor that it's crazy. So I understand why they put such harsh restrictions on this card, and it's fun. And you know who you're going to put into play when you use that card? You're going to put into play Mace Tyrell, Mace the Ace. Yes, he's another loyal small council member, so now we have to pick between Lannisters and Tyrells for our faction, for our small council deck. But he's also a lord, so he's searchable with, well, of course, This Must Be Answered Fiercely, but also Heir to the Iron Throne. He's a 6-cost unique, which means he can be a 4-cost unique if you have Great Hall. He has a +1 gold modifier, which is pretty good because you probably just dumped a lot of resources into playing him. You might have used one of your heftier gold plot cards. I mean, that's just always helpful. When would you not want that? After he's knelt, you draw 2 cards, and then you pick a card in your hand and put it on top of your deck. This gives you +1 in card advantage. It also cycles the cards you have. So even though you're only getting 1 card, you're actually getting 2 cards and then getting rid of your worst card. So it's kind of like getting 1.5 cards. I mean, you still have the same amount of cards in your hand, +1, but you had a good choice in the matter. Furthermore, now you know the top card of your deck, and many Tyrell cards have to do with you predicting the top card of your deck, such as Old Town, or I forget the name, but there's another one that you pick top card of your deck, and if it's a character, then you pick character and it gains that much strength. So that is not only good in terms of cycling and drawing, because he's going to kneel probably every turn. It also, that little extra thing of putting a card on the top of your deck is really cool for Tyrells. And you don't even have to show your opponent, so they gain no information. Yeah, I don't know the other versions of Mace, so I'm not going to say right now whether I think this card is good or not, because these types of cards really, how good they are is dependent on why would I run this if the other one is better, or why would I run the other one if this one is better a lot of the time. But solid card. 6 cost. He's not broken. He's not going to stitch your deck together. He's not going to be a huge problem when he's on the board, but he's going to help you with gold. He's going to help you manage your hand. He's just going to make everything a little bit easier for you, and I like him. He's the ace. Time for the Starks, and here we have the Godswood. What a beautiful looking little heart tree with a very tiny face in it. It's not even weeping. I actually hate the artwork on this card. The Godswood should be so much prettier than this. Like, it was gorgeous in the show, let's be real. Anyway, it's a 2-cost, non-unique location. Those are always fun. If you win a challenge as the attacking player, this is one of those cards that supports winter plot cards because the Starks all know winter is coming. If there's more winter plot cards than summer plot cards in play, you can kneel it to draw cards equal to the claim value on your faction card. Now, I'm not familiar if Starks have reliable ways of raising their claim value. However, that is on average going to be 1 card. This is a 2-cost location. It requires you to have winter cards in your plot deck, and it requires you to get lucky that your opponent doesn't play a summer plot card. And there are plenty of splashable good summer plot cards that people might be playing, even if they're not playing a summer deck. So honestly, I don't like this card at all. I think the Godswood should be a way bigger card than this. It's specifically exclusive to 1 plot deck strategy that the other Starks can support, but you don't want to be locked into that. It's a 2-cost location that has nothing to do with getting gold or marshaling things more cheaply. It has draw power that is limited to 1 time per turn because it kneels itself, and is pretty negligible for its cost, although it does have a fairly lenient restriction once the plot cards are out. All you have to do is win a challenge. Overall, nah. To finish this one off, we are ending with another army card. So this one's a 5-cost, not a 6-cost, which is a little bit more reasonable, I think. Host of the Riverlands. Is that not Rob Stark's host? Whatever. Has the boring icons. 5 strength, though. If your strength matches your cost, you're doing something right. It's an army, so obviously it can be stood by high ground, but also it's a House Tully card, and House Tully cards all support each other, and it has Bestow in addition to no attachment, so this is rather unique for an army character. So you can only actually trigger the Bestow ability when a House Tully character gains power. Is that likely? Yes, that's their whole synergy. They like to gain power, and a lot of them have renown, so that's really not very unlikely. Then when they gain power, you can scrap a gold from this guy to give them another power. Luckily, they were smart enough to print limit once per phase, or else they would gain that extra power. You would scrap a gold, they would gain an extra, you would do it over and over again. But luckily, they cut that out of the game, right? Well, no, but realistically, yes. This guy's not unique, so if you had multiple copies of him on the field and you managed to bestow them all, which would cost you a grand total of 24 gold, that would be impressive. You would also need other House Tully characters, but then when one of them gained power, you could use one of these to give it an extra power. Then when it gained that power, you could use another one to give it. That would just be hilarious and fun. Not good. It would not be worth it. Do not take this as a recommendation. I'm just saying it's funny. Okay. Yep, that's all I got. Bye.